long as I'm not hurting other people, I can kind of just exist and be okay with that. I know that building up this framework now is going to be really helpful for the future, and I'm really excited to see what I'll be like.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their fascinating stories. We strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy approach to non-monogamy. However, it's important to remember that everyone does it a little bit differently, and the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we produce this show for entertainment purposes only. Please be aware that we aren't doctors or therapists. Consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Welcome to episode 144. We're Finn and Emma, and today we have an interview with Nicki. She is in her early 20s and very new to this all, but is super excited for everything in front of her.
Yeah, she talks about it later in the episode, but she basically says how she's standing at the edge, staring into the abyss, and literally she has everything in front of her, and it's super exciting. She is incredibly emotionally intelligent, has a high EQ, and yeah, I mean, it's a great conversation, and we're really excited to be able to put it out there. So thank you to her for reaching out, wanting to come on, and she was at the August meet and greet with her partner.
Yes. And so before we jump into the show, we do have a quick few announcements, as we normally do. And the first one is our next virtual meet and greet. Finn just mentioned the last one. Our next one is going to be...
Nicki was at the last one with her boyfriend.
The next one is going to be on September 19th. That's another Saturday. It's going to be at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, which is 7:30 p.m. Pacific. So hopefully more West Coasters will join.
Yeah, if you haven't been to one of these before, we would love to have you join us. They're super fun. They last about 2 hours, and we basically bring everybody together, ask some icebreaker questions, do breakout rooms. It's a sort of a speed meet and greet, speed dating, get to know awesome people kind of thing. I don't know. It's been a blast, and they've been growing every month. So we're hoping to probably have close to 40 people at this one, and we're really excited about it. So we hope you make it.
If you want to sign up, go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, and click on the meet and greet tab at the top.
It is $10, and it is open to anyone and everyone, not just Patreon members.
Yes. Speaking of Patreon, we also have a few events coming up for our Patreon members.
How about that setup, though?
Yeah, good segue.
I just teed it up, really like a softball, and you just
ran with it.
Right out of the park. Well, we were mixing analogies.
I guess I hit it out of the park.
Thank you. There you go. Yep, that's better.
So our next women's group call for our Patreon members is September 16th. That's a Wednesday. And our next Q&A is going to be on September 30th. So if you want any details about what those are or join those, they're amazing events, and we have a really good turnout at each of those. So go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, and click on the Patreon button.
Yeah, you won't be alone. There's over 100 other members.
Woohoo!
So thank you to all of you 100 awesome badasses who support the show and support each other, honestly, week in and week out on the MeWe group, and then come to the virtual meet and greets to support each other. It's honestly one of the things we really look forward to every month. So
yes.
Thank you all.
You meant the Q&As.
The Q&As.
You said virtual meet and greets.
Well, sometimes they come to those too.
It's all good.
And they support us. They come and they're our emotional support animals.
And last but not least, just going to glaze over what you said. We wanted to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Alt Playground, and they have been our sponsor for the last few months. They're a dating website for open-minded people.
And non-monogamous people,
yes.
More specifically.
Sure.
What kind of people, you wonder? Well, all kinds of people, I say.
You're just nailing it today.
I know, I'm all over it. So you could, when you sign up, you make your profile, you can choose from 9 different gender identities, 9 different relationship statuses,
8 relationship types, and 13 sexual orientations. They are constantly evolving and growing and launching new features.
Yeah, it's a pretty great place to be. It's a great place to build community, find other open-minded, non-monogamous, and frankly, pretty cool people.
Yes.
So if you're interested in joining, you can head over to their website directly, altplayground.net, and sign up.
Or our website.
Well, that was synced up. Do it again.
or normalizingnonmonogamy.com, in case we haven't said it enough. Sign up there.
Yeah. It doesn't matter where you sign up. The result is the same. And we just appreciate the support for us and for them.
Yes. Thank you.
With that, we just want to say one final thing, which is head over to our website.
Normalizing Non-Monogamy.com.
Click on the Contact Us button. Send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. We do honestly love hearing from everybody. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know how you're doing. Hopefully you're holding up well during the COVID here.
You can also send us a voicemail.
Yeah, those are the best. We send them back. They're just like this, rambly nonsense. So if you want one of those, you got to send one to us. It's a tit for tat.
Yes.
Quid pro quo.
Yep. Also on our website, under the podcast tab, you find show notes for every single episode. There's pictures of our guests and links that are mentioned in each episode. So if you haven't checked out the show notes, there's a wealth of information there. You should definitely go check it out.
And with that, let's go talk to Nicki.
Let's go. Well, welcome, Nicki. We're super excited to have you here today. You reached out to us actually fairly recently, and we kind of did a quick turnaround, invited you on this show, and we're super excited to hear your story.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we were super excited about was you're maybe slightly younger than our normal guest age. You're only 7. No, I'm just kidding. No, you're totally joking. But you do bring a little bit of diversity that we haven't had as much of. So we're really excited about that. So again, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, we don't know much about you, and presumably not many of the listeners do. Yeah. Do you mind telling everybody who is Nicki?
Sure. So I hope you all know I wrote notes, so I know perfect. What to say. But I'm Nicki. I am from San Francisco. But I'm currently in college in Southern California. I'm a rising senior, so I'll be graduating soon. Hopefully not over Zoom, but at this point, I don't know anymore. And I am pursuing a self-designed major in education and community engagement with a minor in Asian American studies. And then in terms of my, I guess, like relationally, I've lived my life in monogamous relationships, and I also grew up in a monogamous family, and my community is monogamous. And what I think is interesting too is I did not realize how present the non-monogamous community was in San Francisco until I joined it. That apparently there's a very big presence here.
Well, and so your models growing up were all monogamy. What sparked your interest in non-monogamy? So
earlier this year, I had ended a 3-year monogamous relationship, and there's a lot to unpack there, which I will mention a little later. But I started dating around again and had met someone who I've never met someone who I see and absolutely just swoon over. That's not the kind of person I am, but it happened with this person. And we also had a lot in common just on a very surface level. And for context, we were using a dating app, and we started talking, and their profile had indicated that they were polyamorous. And I think I went in with the intention of dating around very casually, but not wanting to commit myself to a romantic relationship assuming that it would be a monogamous relationship. And I wanted to work on myself, and work more internally. And so I definitely wanted to be in flirtationships or do things that I thought were fun, but not actually be serious. And so being in kind of just getting to know this person who's polyamorous, I had learned a lot about polyamory. And at the time, it was still something that I thought it's really cool. And I really admire this person. His name is Connor. I really admire Connor for doing what's best for him, but I never saw myself never putting in myself in that position. But as we started talking more, I had really begun to understand and realize that he brought out a certain softness and safety in me that I had never experienced before with anyone. And through that connection, I realized that perhaps I do actually want to pursue a romantic relationship with this person. And then second of all, I started to understand the implications of that, of wanting to be in a romantic relationship with someone who is not monogamous. So it definitely was a 2-part situation, but was still very exciting. And so as I had gotten to know him better and we started casually dating, I learned again more about his experience with polyamory, and that he also mentioned this like very upfront too, that he has a couple partners. He lives with his primary partner, and he also wanted to make sure that that was something that was okay with me in terms of me being comfortable being previously monogamous or being at the time monogamous in a non-monogamous relationship. And so definitely through those conversations and then through just getting to know him and experiencing things with him, I definitely started to better understand my role in a non-monogamous relationship, but also started to see how beneficial it actually really is for me at this time, especially in terms of what I mentioned earlier about wanting to improve myself and work more towards the things that I had noticed were unhealthy habits and unhealthy practices that I had done previously in my long-term monogamous relationship. I had realized that, at least for me, I found that non-monogamy has really, I don't know if forced is the right word to use, but I've definitely had to reflect and uncover a lot of my own insecurities and really tap into myself, that it actually has served, like non-monogamy has served as a really wonderful tool to help and address the issues that I initially wanted to work on and was afraid of getting into a relationship around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way to say it, because it does force you to look at yourself and actually confront maybe even some of your fears.
Yeah, definitely. And I identify as someone who runs very anxious, and I find a certain sense, like a certain affinity with like empaths and HSPs, and that's something that I've definitely learned more about myself recently in terms of feeling things very deeply. But with that, I've also noticed like tendencies of perfectionism and people pleasing. And when I started to better understand the insecurities that I had and things that I wanted to confront through this relationship, that it also brought out a lot. I think I definitely learned more about those behaviors or those tendencies that I have, and in the ways that it's very, like, detrimental to me and my partner or to people around me, in the ways that I could definitely try to use tools to help like mitigate those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you mind explaining a little bit what you mentioned, empath and HSP, a little bit like what that really means, and then how maybe non-monogamy has helped you in that, like identifying those and working through that?
Mm-hmm. So I learned about empaths and HSPs most like in depth through a podcast called Emotional Badass. And in that podcast, the host talks a lot about, she identifies as an empath and an HSP, but the way that I don't want to put words in her mouth or accidentally define it in a way that she doesn't resonate with. But I guess the way that I've synthesized it is that empaths and highly sensitive people are folks who think a lot and think very deeply about things, especially about other people and themselves. I've always found, I guess, like within the context of my own life, I found that I care very deeply about like social issues, and that's something that I always knew about myself. But through the context of like being an empath and an HSP, I think I better understand it, both in terms of wanting to help make the world a less shitty place, but also relationally and building relationships to help people. And in terms of non-monogamy, I don't think I really understood how big of a role my personality or my temperament really played into like my journey with non-monogamy. As I look at my notes, I think something that I found is that, or something that I noticed really early on, was when I first started seeing Connor romantically, and I had at that point had already known, or it was already established that he was living with one of his partners and that they had been together for a few years, that I didn't really know, I didn't have a name for it, and perhaps this isn't like the best term to use for it, but at least what I felt was conversion. I definitely at that time felt, even though I didn't really know these people that well, that I could feel the love and the sense of security and affinity that Connor has for his partner. And I also think that in terms of having difficult conversations, it's in general, but especially with Connor, I found that being an empath and being someone who thinks very deeply and thinks a lot, that it has helped. Like, feel like I have a lot of thoughts going all the time about different things, and non-monogamy by nature, or at least in my experience with non-monogamy, has helped, or kind of really pushed me to have more honest communication with people. And so it's been really cool being able to share authentically what I feel and share all of the things that are going on in my head, obviously with boundaries, but it's very, it feels very affirming to be able to do that. And it definitely has been really wonderful being able to feel like my empathetic tendencies, I guess, are valued and heard and are wanted because of our clearly established value in communication.
Right. Well, and something that thank you for sharing, by the way. But something you shared, and for the listeners, we had some technical difficulties, and I can't remember if you said this during one of those times where we were having technical difficulties or not. So that you had some exposure to non-monogamy before this, where partners would bring it up and it scared you or concerned you from you didn't necessarily say jealous, but from to you that signified that you weren't enough. Mm-hmm. And I guess maybe can you talk a little bit about the way that non-monogamy came up before meeting Connor, and how you were able to make the shift when you met Connor to not have those same concerns? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's actually, the more that I reflect on my experience, or kind of my journey in non-monogamy, and also my experiences in previous relationships, the more I feel like everything just makes sense now to me. Well, so there are a couple things, but in terms of people, like past partners bringing up the possibility of non-monogamy and not feeling enough, I think it also came from a place of worrying. Actually, well, in the end, it ended up being that they wanted to cheat, but wanted to do it in an ethical way through non-monogamy. But yeah, it definitely came from a place, or at least my reaction would be this fear of losing my partner, but also in deep down feeling like I'm not enough. And that definitely rang true in a lot of my past relationships, even with this one sometimes, but I've gotten a lot better at addressing and naming my feelings and then doing something about it. But I think one of the best examples that helps me kind of best illustrate for myself my feelings of not being enough, or wanting to do everything but also nothing at the same time, was in one of the long-term relationship, monogamous, the relationship that I had been in before Connor. It didn't start out as a codependent relationship, but unfortunately through substance abuse on behalf of my partner or a past former partner, and I think this is fundamentally we're not that compatible, and with that also did not come great communication, and on both sides this unwillingness to be vulnerable, that our relationship became one where I felt that I had to be everything, the caretaker for my partner who's experiencing substance abuse, and the therapist, and the sexy time girlfriend or whatever, and at the same time also be a student and take care of my own emotional well-being, be a dog mom. And so there were multiple things, and at the time I didn't recognize that I didn't have to be everything, or I expect myself to be all those things, because it's not realistic. And so now being in a non-monogamous relationship and really being confronted with the fact that my partner has other partners, that I learned and internalized that they fill different components of his life, because he, like myself, and made up of different parts and different components of our identity, that even though it definitely has been really hard to internalize that and internalize the fact that I don't need to be everything, but pretend like I'm nothing at the same time, to normalize trying to be a perfectionist, or trying to normalize my perfectionist tendencies. But I kind of forgot where I was going with that. But I definitely have been, non-monogamy has definitely helped me better understand that for myself, that I only need to be what I think is good enough, or what I know is good enough for myself, and that is enough, and my partner values that in me also.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I think that's huge.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing that too, because it's not easy to necessarily reflect on all of that and confront that in yourself and acknowledge it.
Yeah. So have you at this point started exploring with other partners as well? Or
That was going to be my question too,
it Connor is non-monogamous? And not that you're not non-monogamous just because you don't have other partners. I don't think that's how it works. But have you started exploring with other partners and the possibility of other partners outside of Connor as well, and seeing it from the perspective of you having that, not just being with somebody who's having that?
I feel like if we were in the circumstances that we are currently in terms of COVID, I think my answer would be a little different, or I would probably be much more active, or I think I would definitely be much more active in wanting to seek more relationships with people, or at least people who I could meet in person. But I have been able to have, how do I put this? I definitely have seen other people in it, like other than Connor, in like through hookups and stuff like that. But I don't really feel compelled to actively search for other like more like romantic connections at the moment. And perhaps that will change. Well, I know it definitely will change at some point. But I think that part of it for me definitely is that I know this is going to gas Connor up a lot, but I think I know very deeply how big of a role he plays in my life and how much he means to me. And I don't know if other people can reach that level. And I don't think that's really fair for me to expect other people to be at that same, like to meet me at that same level. I know that's not realistic. And so it's definitely something like when I do feel like I'm more ready to perhaps build connections that are more intimate or more vulnerable, that I would like to at least internalize that people fulfill different aspects of my life, and not everyone will bring out that same softness that Connor brings. But another thing too is that as I mentioned, I'm still a student in college, and I am pretty active on campus online, even though we're not, like, it's the summer, and I'm on our like student government, and there are things and committees that I'm part of that have been meeting throughout the summer and have been doing a lot of like really meaningful work, but definitely exhausting work. And I've definitely realized that I am, through this non-monogamous relationship and knowing that I'm reminding myself that I don't have to be everything, I've been able to spend really valuable time doing work that I really care about. And I think it might have been Marla Renee Stewart in one of the episodes who mentioned that she feels like she's dating her work almost. Or I'm pretty sure she said something like that. And I definitely, like, when I heard that, I resonated with that a lot. And yeah, so it definitely has been like, I definitely don't know if and when I'll be ready for like other, like, connect at least at like that same level. If it'll ever get there, I'm not sure. And I don't want to close that possibility, but I definitely have really just been allowing myself to really engage in the work that I am really passionate about, while also, if I feel like seeing other people, of providing myself the space and like the permission to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like it's not a goal. Like you don't feel like, well, he's got another partner, I have to go and also get another partner, so we're matched. So we're even, right? But at the same time, you said you've had some more casual hookup type encounters, and you have that freedom, right? If you want to, you can do that without feeling guilty or without worrying. It's an option that you have that freedom. So
right. But definitely something too that I have reflected on a lot is that when I do hook up with people, I really try to assess to make sure that it's coming from like an authentic place of me wanting to be actively in this situation, and not being a place of trying to level up with Connor in any way, which that has happened a couple of times, or like 1 or 2 times, where I tried to convince myself that this is what I really wanted, and while that still is true, I think there also is a component of wanting to feel like I'm performing non-monogamy and polyamory in a way that I felt was expected. So I definitely do. Well, I do give myself that freedom. I also definitely acknowledge that there are times where I need to reassess the relationships or the connections that I'm making to make sure that it's one that I genuinely want to be part of in this circumstance right now, and that it's not coming out of a place of insecurity.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. And to be fair, I don't know that there's anything wrong if there is a momentary lapse and you feel insecure and you go for it. Like, that's going to happen. People are going to do that. And that's not like, I failed at non-monogamy because I went and had a hookup because Connor did or because whoever did, right? Not that I'm like here giving you permission. I just feel like there's people listening who are like, well, it's going to happen, and you're gonna feel insecure, and you might feel that this person provides some reinforcement that you needed in that moment. And if you can get that, like, I don't know, good for you.
Yeah, that's affirming to hear. Because I felt more insecure about definitely not upholding what I thought were like I don't know exactly what it was, but I definitely did feel disappointed in myself. But at the same time, I knew that I also wanted and needed to provide myself that patience to learn and explore things for myself. So I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
And it definitely affirms a lot what I've been trying to tell myself, but it's harder for me to tell myself and internalize it versus having someone else say it.
Right. Well, and you know, I'm not exactly a doctor or therapist by any stretch of the imagination. So I would just coming from a place of like
talking to a lot of different people.
Yeah. And like knowing personally, like you find yourself in a position where like maybe you're having an insecure day and somebody comes along and makes you feel really good about yourself and you go for it. And like at the end of the day, like if you weren't putting yourself in danger or harming yourself or the other person, like there's nothing wrong with taking advantage of that feeling and feeling good. And even if in retrospect, you're like, you know, maybe not the best idea, but like, we're all human. Right? So, go get some.
No one was harmed. Yeah. I'm curious, have you been open with friends and family about exploring a new relationship kind of dynamic for yourself? And if so, how is those conversations gone?
So I have shared this exploration of non-monogamy with a couple of folks, like my best friend, and then a couple of other friends from school who I know would be either they brought it up, but not knowing that I was exploring non-monogamy, or I mentioned it to them, and we've engaged in really wonderful conversations about it. I think depending on if I decide to mention to people that I was on this podcast, this might be the introduction for some of my friends that I am exploring non-monogamy. But I feel at this point, I realize that whether or not I'm the one to initiate that conversation, if they find this, that's cool. And I think it's definitely a helpful step for me personally to be able to want to put this out there, and then if people find it, then engage in that conversation. And I also do recognize that I think there's a level of privilege in being able to do that and kind of put myself out there. And then I don't worry about the repercussions a lot, at least in terms of physical safety or anything like that. I don't feel that. And so I would acknowledge that there definitely is some privilege in being able to do that. But I don't know. I also don't feel like at least I personally don't feel like it's a big thing for me to share with people in a way to normalize this relationship dynamic. So I don't know if people find it, hey, but, and then in terms of my family, I haven't mentioned it. I've definitely been planning, or I've definitely been trying to work out how I want to craft that conversation. And I know, knowing my family, I know that they'll be accepting, whether or not they understand that that's their thing, but I know that they'll be accepting of it, or who I am, or what I'm trying to explore. But I definitely have been very careful about how I frame my relationships with my family right now, because I know that I want to be in a place where I feel confident in normalizing non-monogamy to the point where I can talk to my family about it and not feel like if I receive feedback that isn't the feedback that I wanted, that I can feel confident in still feeling secure about what I'm doing, but also provide my own insight on, or I guess respond in a way where I feel like I'm not being swayed.
Right. You want to be able to back it up.
Right.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And hi, Nicki's friends, if any of you are listening. Thank you for finding the show.
And that reminds me, I had a conversation with one of my friends from high school. He and I had not spoken for 4 years, I think, and we also weren't that close, but I don't know why we decided to start talking again and hanging out. And I had mentioned non-monogamy to him and that I was exploring it and that my partner is polyamorous. And we ended up talking for 2 hours, and he just kept asking me all of these questions, absolutely enthralled with the idea of non-monogamy. And it was, I just remembered about it. It was really cool having someone who I know in a different context, but just like period, knowing someone who really is interested in hearing my experience, and also seemed like he wanted to potentially engage in this relationship dynamic himself. Yeah, so it definitely, it's definitely been super cool with the people who I do end up talking about it with, or just happen to talk about it with, that it's been really affirming. And I also appreciate that my friends, I guess the people who I surround myself with, I know that they support me and I support them. So I know that the people I talk to, that they will try to shut it down. At least I hope not.
Right. Yeah. So that's amazing.
So something that we were having a conversation with somebody last night about the younger generations, and not that we say that like we're in our 50s or anything, but that
not like there's anything wrong with that.
No, just that they made the comment that people in their teens and early 20s now are basically, their view was they're going to tear down all of the outstanding relationship models and sexuality sort of confines that exist and basically rewrite everything from scratch. And I guess you're sort of at that like early stages of, adult life, exploring relationships. Do you see like in yourself and the people around you a lot more interest or exploration of non-monogamy or different sexualities or different relationship dynamics than maybe you saw modeled even by people, a couple years before you?
Excellent question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in terms of non-monogamy, I mean, the people who, I just, again, because of COVID, I haven't had the opportunity to meet people. That'll change at the virtual meet and greet. But the people who I have met are Connor's friends, and a lot of them are polyamorous, and we're also generally all the same age, which I thought was really cool. I didn't realize there were people my age doing this. But I think just circumstantially, I haven't really had a lot of people in my life, both growing up in a community that valued monogamy and also just because of circumstances now, that I just haven't had a lot of exposure or other models of non-monogamous relationships. But that being said, I say this because it's the only thing that I've really been able to connect it to, I guess, in my own journey, is that so I'm bisexual, and I found that the way that I've articulated to myself exploring non-monogamy has kind of been and coming to terms with that this is something that I want to do, has been the way that I've been describing it is almost like a second coming out. And I definitely see overlap in the queer community and in the non-monogamous community. And so that's been really cool, because I also growing up, and even now, I've, again, whether it's through circumstance or just we all find each other, a lot of my friends are queer. And it's funny because in high school, my friend group, we all ended up coming out as either gay, lesbian, or bisexual at some point in high school, individually, whether or not we were aware that the other we all were queer. So I've definitely, I guess, in terms of building community in, I don't know if the word alternative is if I really want to use that, but I guess non-heterosexual and non-monogamous. Thank you, heteronormative conventions. I feel like I definitely have, I definitely do feel some parallels and have had a lot of exposure to the queer community, and also just being queer and having 99% of my friends also identify as queer. And I'm like, that being said, I'm just really excited to when I am able to meet people that I'm hoping, and I'm also pretty confident that I'll feel that sense of affirmation and safety and security that I feel with the people who I've met in the queer community, with the monogamous community.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Have you explored your bisexual side? Like, have you dated women?
I haven't.
No, it's okay. It's not a criticism. It's just a question.
Yeah, I sigh because I feel like a running joke with a lot of my friends is that we've all wanted to build romantic relationships with women, but then end up dating men, which isn't a bad thing, but it's just kind of funny because we all end up having the same experience of not being able to find women. But I have had like sexual experiences with women, and I'm really excited to be able to explore my sexuality further through non-monogamy. Yeah. So I'm just very excited. I have all these plans and dreams of exploring post-COVID, whether it's virtual, post-COVID or not. I'm here for it.
That's amazing. Yeah.
The people we were talking to the other night kept calling it the Great Fucking, which is what they're calling when everybody's allowed to go back out after COVID. So that's a very crass term for it. But.
Yeah, and it's actually really funny that you mentioned that, because Connor is very involved in like the play party scene in San Francisco, and he has mentioned that once it's safe to do so again, that he would like to bring me to a couple parties, which I'm stoked about. So I'm definitely been staying inside and hoping that other people do too. Not only for me, but also because
for the orgies,
and of course for general well-being of other people, but also the orgies. Yeah, public health and the orgies.
Which I guess, brings up the next question of where do you see your exploration of non-monogamy going? And it sounds like there's the potential for other romantic partners down the road, but that exploring it in a more, I just keep use the word casual is the PC term, but hookups or, sex versus having more relationship styles. And it sounds like that is also of interest to you. Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the things that I really tried to build a framework around for myself initially when I started really exploring non-monogamy and understanding its implications in my own life was to not try to place any assumptions or any goals of where I want to be in terms of my relationships. But I think something that I do, I guess the way that I've definitely been seeing it is that I know that I've been putting in a lot of work in myself and in my current relationship and relationships with other people, not just in romantic relationships, that have really helped me become a person that feels like I can kind of just exist and do what I want. And as long as I'm not hurting other people, I can kind of just exist and be okay with that. I know that building up this framework now is going to be really helpful for the future, and I'm really excited to see what I'll be like. And I do think that definitely as I navigate the different parts of myself that I'm experiencing now with school and with being in this funky life stage of being an adult, but also still kind of being a kid. And I definitely do know that things will change, especially probably in the next year or two as I graduate or as my responsibilities shift or the context of my responsibilities shift, and that the relationships that might come out of that or the different opportunities that come with that. So yeah, I'm not really sure, but I'm really excited to explore those opportunities as they arise, again, using this framework that I'm really trying to build now so I can thrive in the future. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or hopefully at least.
Yeah. That's super exciting. I wanted to ask too, before we started recording, you mentioned that your dog was a big part of your story. And I'm curious. I want to know about your dog because he's a cutie.
Yeah, so he'll probably come over in a second, but so he is Okay, so his name is Moxie, and he is a 7-year-old Chihuahua mix. I adopted him my freshman year of college, and then he's my emotional support animal or registered as my emotional support animal on campus. So he lives with me in the dorms, and he has been a tremendous help to or I guess he's been like a tremendous component to my journey in my mental health. I guess this is more in terms of my relationships or internally how I know that I have like an intimate connection with someone is I kind of compare, I don't know if it's a fair comparison, but I compare my relationship with Moxie and the depth that has and the complexity that has to my human relationships. Because Moxie's my emotional support animal, or not because, but in being my emotional support animal, I found that he is, or that I guess we're both very much in tune with each other's like feelings and emotions. And he also carries a lot of emotional baggage and trauma, being a rescue dog who has an abusive past. And so I definitely have found that our really unique and special relationship that we have is something, I guess the way that the love that I have for him, again, the context is very different, but the love that I have for him isn't one that I've, up until I met Connor, I've really felt for somebody, or this like that level, just that depth. And again, it seems like it's such an intangible thing for me to be able to describe, but when I feel it, it's very clear for me. So in terms of relationships, that definitely has, like, my Moxie meter has been really helpful. And then
I love that term.
And then I think also just in terms of understanding that, what was it? I don't know. There was some kind of, probably after we end this interview, I'll remember what it was. But I mean, another thing that I find really important too, or that I really value, is that because I have Moxie and he's a big part of my life, that I'm currently living alone, so I take care of, like, I've always taken care of him, and have been like his primary caretaker, or his mom, I don't know, his mom. It has helped me internalize, again, this idea of parts, and that I am a student, and I am my own being, and I'm a dog mom, and I'm all these other things, and that I can honor those different parts while not feeling like I have to be perfect in all of them. So definitely just fundamentally having, like, the existence of someone, I mean, there's a dog, someone who is more than human in my life, has helped me just better understand that I can exist in multiple ways, and that while I, of course, want to do the best that I can with Moxie and do the best for him, that the reality is that I will make mistakes, and not mistakes with like major repercussions, but that, yeah, I can be multiple things and not feel like I have to be perfect in all of them.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing that I maybe wanted to get a little bit of clarity on was the shift when you were on a dating app and you came across Connor's profile and it said polyamorous, that you, well, let's just, for sake of it, you swiped right? I don't know what app it was. I don't know.
I swiped right so fast. Yeah.
Okay. But earlier you said, well, when non-monogamy came up, it was something that scared you. And so I guess just understanding what was the
flip.
Yeah. What was the flip? What was the like polyamory swipe right? We're getting into this. Like you decided to go for it.
Maybe it was his pictures.
Well, that's what I want to know. What did he do for you?
Well, oh my goodness. I think the biggest thing that I have definitely understood now is, I think it's different. It was different in the past. In the past, it was different where someone had brought up non-monogamy to me, whereas I was involving myself voluntarily as someone who was non-monogamous, and I also wasn't intending, when I started like going on dating apps, I wasn't really intending to actually build connections, at least build connections in the depth that I have been used to, or that I usually prefer.
Right.
As much as I love having sex and hooking up with people, I knew, like, that was not my mind. Like, it was not my mindset to go and try to find a partner who I connected really well with after having a lot of unresolved things that I wanted to work on. But anyways, so I think it was definitely that I knew that I was going into something that I thought was I thought it was cool, but I also probably wasn't going to stick around for too long. And it also was not he's the one who was polyamorous, not me. So I felt more comfortable involving myself in something that felt not emotionless, but I didn't feel like I was investing as much emotional energy as I would in other relationships, but I also didn't know him. Yeah. So there were definitely layers of security, or I guess what I thought was security in terms of, I can do this and it'll be fun.
Right. Right. Yeah. The difference is you're going into it with that mindset versus you were in the monogamy mindset with a partner, and then they say, hey, let's change the model. And, right. It's a different feel to it.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And maybe that leads into the question of moving forward in your exploration of non-monogamy, besides the orgies, what are some of the things that you're excited about?
Yeah.
Exploring. And on the flip side, what are some of the things that maybe are scary or you're concerned about?
I'm really excited to meet people who I'm not in the same age bracket. We're not in the same age bracket. I know, especially from listening to your show, I know that there are a lot of folks who are older than I am who are non-monogamous, and I've always been in relationships with people who are older than I am, but it would only be 1 or 2 years. And I'm also relatively young, so I think just in terms of dating people who are older than I am, it's the context is a little different. So I'm much newer to dating people who are older than I am or significantly older than I am. So I'm excited about that, especially just in terms of hopefully meeting and building connections with people who, even though we're in different life stages, that we can still connect emotionally to some capacity, or at least meet each other in some way that is special. I'm also really excited, and I guess more personally, I'm excited to be able to gain more confidence and strength in feeling secure about my own relationships with people, and feeling secure in my relationships, as well as feeling secure in myself of when my partners want to explore other people or do things with other people, that I can feel, I guess the way that I've been describing for myself is feel more neutral about it, or just somatically feel more neutral about it, and if not somatically, then be able to have the more tools to be able to mitigate my physiological reactions, and to feel like I can do it in a healthy way. And I definitely in the past month have developed a lot of resources and tools to be able to help me do that. And so I'm hoping through more practice with that, and really being in tune with how I'm feeling, and just being very aware of that I can improve a lot more, kind of just be in a different place in the future. And then in terms of what I'm nervous about, I think I'm definitely, even though I placed this framework, I developed this mindset very early on that I want to be very patient with myself and not have a lot of expectations in my exploration of non-monogamy. I do definitely kind of worry about this abyss, because I don't know where I'm going. And I still definitely do worry about losing Connor, and then I definitely think that I feel with people in general, and I also know that those are, I think the fears that I have, especially around relationship insecurity, is something that is not exclusive to non-monogamy, but definitely that definitely kind of plays a big component to it. So I know that that's something that I'm very happy that I've been able to kind of address that in myself, and that's something that I'm concerned about in this abyss of my future in non-monogamy. But that being said, I do know that in what I also have been trying to actively do for myself, that this will be a really helpful tool to be able to reflect and work on and heal those insecurities or heal those concerns that I have.
Yeah. No, I think it's incredible because, thinking about where you are in your journey, right? You're on the 0.01 yard line, looking down the football field. And it's not just a football field. Maybe it's a baseball field or whatever. You have literally the entire
the abyss, like you said.
You can go in any one of a million directions.
Yeah.
or all of them, right? And that like the possibilities are basically infinite for you at this stage. So I can see now that I've made it seem even more overwhelming. Good luck with that. But no, but like it's an incredible place to be, but also like, yeah, it could be a little overwhelming, like staring in that and being like, well, what do I want to do? And then you kind of have to like try it and see if you liked it, and then try something else and see if you like that. And you just, it's a lot of exploring and fun and scary and all of the things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that also, like, just in terms of thinking, like, I've definitely had a big mindset shift in thinking about my future, or just like the idea of the future. I mean, I definitely do think that non-monogamy played a big role in this, but I, up until very recently, had this mindset of that I needed to have everything planned out. And I think that also, as like a college student, I think I definitely, especially freshman year, felt this pressure to have everything figured out, or to just run the race, the educational race, and then start working.
Yeah.
Which I definitely do think is the narrative for, like, in general, for a lot of people, or that a lot of people end up internalizing. And I also I definitely felt a sense of constraint with my relationships, where when I was in my long-term relationship, I felt like, okay, this is it. Like, I think I'm set, quote unquote, set for life. And also having like models around me where my parents met each other when they were in high school and they've been like together ever since, that I definitely felt, I think I definitely had, it definitely was this mindset of like, I met somebody, I'm set, and I don't really need to explore beyond this realm of comfort or whatever it is that I felt. Whereas now I definitely still struggle with that concept of trying to have everything figured out, or feeling like I need to be set or perform my age in a certain way. That at the same time, non-monogamy has definitely helped me kind of chill out and realize that, like, and it really set in, like, internalize the fact that I am really, really young, and that there is a lot that I can still do. And especially now knowing and reflecting on the past 22 years, like, I've done a lot in 22 years. So I know that I can do a lot more with the time that I have left, which hopefully will be a lot. But so that definitely, that mindset shift, or it's the way that I've definitely have reframed thinking about the future has been really interesting, especially within the context of like exploring non-monogamy.
Yeah. Do you have any recommendations for anybody? I was gonna say like others your age, in your age bracket, but really for anybody, that if they're just starting out and where they should start to learn a little bit more besides our podcast.
Okay,
I wasn't going to do that one, but I was like, do you have other resources?
That was about, no, I'm kidding. I didn't know where to start, and it was kind of funny because this is really tangential, but I remember being super overwhelmed, and I was in a state of panic, where it's like I was feeling very anxious, and I didn't know where to start seeking help for where I could go, even though I definitely knew logically that there are a lot of resources. I was not in a place to be able to do that at that time. So I ended up taking an edible, and then I had this really incredible high where I spent like 3 hours researching different resources. And so I found your podcast that way. I also found this YouTube channel called Open Lifestyle. It's a non-monogamous or polyamorous couple who share their experiences with like polyamory and provide like their own insight for people who want to explore non-monogamy and polyamory, or who are exploring it. I also, during this high, I researched and reached out to a polyaware therapist, and I'm currently seeing her, and I think I looked up like polyaware therapist or something like that, and then found her through that process. But it wasn't like just the fact that she was polyaware, but it also was that I was looking at her profile and how she described herself, and I remember very vividly that she described herself as a recovering perfectionist. And so at that point, that plus the fact that she honors a diversity of relationship dynamics, I knew at that point that was also like a really good resource for me. Mm-hmm. So I definitely know there are other resources And at least those are the ones for me that I found to be super helpful. Yeah. I've started reading The Ethical Slut a little bit. I found it online, so I started reading a little bit, and I definitely, like, there are other resources out there that I do want to explore and sink my teeth into a little more. But your podcast, like, I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you, but your podcast has been like a tremendous resource for me, and I also mentioned that in the email. But I think it's helpful hearing. I think it's one thing to have someone tell you, to explain non-monogamy or polyamory, like the concepts more objectively, or kind of just having it as it is, versus having someone share their experience and really build and really develop a connection with somebody, even if it's just like through audio. Like, I definitely resonate with that a lot more.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're flattered, so thank you.
And I really wasn't trying to get at that.
Sure.
I was curious about the other resources, like the use of the YouTube channel and those. And it's awesome that you found the therapist too. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I think, not to pile onto your anxiety about standing and staring into the abyss of all of the infinite possibilities, but that maybe the takeaway would be that, there's 140-ish different stories on the podcast, and that everybody does a little different, and that there's not one right way to do it, that like whatever way you carve out for yourself will ultimately be your right way. And so
absolutely.
Hopefully that
and
is
it can
somewhat,
change. It can change. That's the biggest thing. All of us continue to grow and change throughout our lives, and what you thought one week and felt one week isn't the same as you might necessarily think or feel a month later. So
yeah, absolutely. And I've definitely found that hearing the different stories, like, obviously not everyone's experience resonates with me, but just knowing that there are, like, there's, as you said, there's no right way to practice non-monogamy has been very helpful on like a very like personal level, just in terms of, again, with like the perfectionist tendencies of knowing that I don't have to perform or do any or practice it in a certain way or hold myself to a certain standard that I make up. Like, it can really kind of be whatever I feel is comfortable and healthy for me.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, it's fantastic. And I think there's probably, I was going to use the term boomer, but I will try not to be derogatory. But there's some people of older generations listening thinking like, damn, I wish I was as forward thinking when I was 20 or 22, and not having waited till I was in my 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s to start exploring this. So I imagine you are striking up some envious feelings in people that are listening. So well done on that. And obviously there's nothing wrong with them having, finding it when they found it, but it's just, I imagine that the generations coming up now, it is going to be a lot more part of the conversation, and that, you telling your friends that you're non-monogamous, or, I mean, honestly, even coming out in high school, when we, 15 years ago, when we were in high school, I mean, partly this was because where we lived, there wasn't a whole lot of diversity, but definitely people weren't really coming out. And so, times are coming along, and our podcast might be obsolete pretty soon if it becomes normalized, right?
Yeah, and I think
always more stories.
That's true.
Yeah, that's so true. And also, I think something that is really helpful now is that, I mean, I think people wouldn't be able to reach this podcast if it weren't for like the internet. And I definitely do feel that at least the people who I've seen, I'm very embarrassed to say that I watch TikTok like nobody's business, but I found that is such an interesting platform, as well as like YouTube and other like platforms online, that where people can really share their experiences, and you can find. I haven't found community on TikTok or anything personally, just because that's not what I'm in. I'm not there for that, but I do know that there are like people have been able to build community in online spaces, much as like you have developed for your podcast, but that especially for like my generation, and we're all, at least the people who I know are very like technology oriented, or that's a big component of their life. That definitely has been like a really helpful way or medium to like build community and to learn more and hear people's experiences through these different mediums.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, of course.
Yeah, for sure. Well,
is there anything else that you wanted to share in your notes that did we
did we cover everything in your notes?
So there actually is something that I was talking to Connor yesterday about this, and I'm still trying to figure it out. And I think I say this because it's something that I think about a lot, and I do think that it is an important component to the conversation. It's a little bit of a. I'll get to what I'm like. The point of what I'm trying to say. It's a little bit of an excursion, but so something that I've noticed throughout like my life as like an Asian Pacific Island woman who is also presents very young, and I'm also bisexual, and I don't think you can see, but I also have a lot of tattoos that in American. I don't know if like American culture, like through a lot of like the stereotyping and fetishization of Asian women, that I present as someone who is very kinky and very, or I guess like all the implications that come with having tattoos and being female and being Asian. And I found that has really informed a lot of what I find, like, I guess where my boundaries are in the people who I interact with and who I feel safe with. And I found I don't want to rule this out completely, because there is a possibility that perhaps someone will change my mind. But from my experience, I found that I'm just fundamentally unsafe with straight cis men. And that, again, that's not always, like, I know that won't always be the case, but just in terms of my experiences, I found that that's always been, I struggle to find an instance where I am intimate with someone where I don't feel like I'm being fetishized for my intersecting identities, especially ones that kind of all intersect with fetishization and exotification and this idea of being kinky or whatever, which in itself, the kinkiness, like, they'll figure that out afterwards. But so I definitely felt this. I think something that I was really nervous about in getting involved in, or participating in this relationship dynamic, was that I could potentially open myself up to feeling less safe, just because, I guess, in theory, if I like introduce myself to more people, so I had brought this up with Connor more as a question of like, with the people who you've interacted with in the past, how have they been in terms of like, being aware of like the racial dynamics or gender dynamics that can come into play in relationships and in non-monogamous relationships, or just whatever relationship it is, that those still exist. And from his experience, at least, he said that, and I think the part that I'm still trying to understand and articulate for myself is, generally speaking, at least from what I remember, he said that because there's a level of digging that he felt like he had to do, or that the people that he's met have had to do to be part of the polyamorous and non-monogamous community, where you already are confronted with at least growing up in America, like American conventions and power dynamics in relationships, that the different intersecting or just different identities or different like intersections of non-monogamy and polyamory and race or whatever, or different identities have come into play. And while I haven't had many experiences with people who are non-monogamous yet, he had assured me that it exists, like, fetishization will exist everywhere, but that at least the people that he's met and the communities that he's been a part of, that there is an understanding that those power dynamics in relationships historically have existed and still exist, and that people are aware and are mindful of that in themselves and with other people. So I think I bring this up because I feel like it definitely was something that I think about a lot, and also just like the implications of my identity and it being hypersexualized on many levels. And then this added component of non-monogamy and how that could, again, potentially open me up for feeling more unsafe, which I'm so glad it hasn't yet, and I hope it doesn't. But yeah, so that's definitely something I just wanted to address, because I do, like, it definitely is like really important to me, again, with like the sense of safety that I found with Connor and with like the queer community and with hopefully the non-monogamous community as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for bringing that up. That's a extremely important point and very well articulated.
Yeah, and I think the thing that maybe where that fear is you kind of expressed was coming from is that even in the confines of monogamy, you sometimes felt that fetishization or that hypersexualization, and then you take and layer on there that oftentimes, or maybe not oftentimes, but there are times when people hear, oh, you're non-monogamous. Well, that just means you're down to fuck, and that's what you're here for. Mm-hmm. And you take that and you compound it on top of the already sort of objectification you felt, that it could be really an uncomfortable feeling for you. And I think that's, it makes total sense. Mm-hmm. So,
well, we appreciate you sharing that. And we hope that you find that that's not the case in the non-monogamous community,
and that there will always be, like you said, it'll always be a possibility, and there will always be outliers, but that hopefully as a whole, that the community is more aware and in tune and respectful of that dynamic. Mm-hmm. So,
and I also know that unfortunately I'm not able to find it in my immediate community, that I know that there are other communities out there that I can meet and get involved with. So I feel like I definitely have a lot more patience, or I feel like I'm coming in with a lot more patience, because I also know that I'm exploring things myself and am here to grow. So yeah, I definitely do feel a lot more willing to take the time to I won't take the time to deal with people who are racist, but I definitely will take the time to be willing to explore the communities that I feel that resonate with me the most, and where I feel the most safe. And
right. Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you for sharing that again, and for sharing everything that you've shared with us. I think, we say this often, but we're really excited to have Nicki come back on as 24-year-old Nicki and 26-year-old Nicki, and see, like, where in the abyss are you? Are you just like, I've done everything. I'm currently at an orgy, and there's whatever.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I can't wait to listen to this podcast, like this episode, when I'm older, and just all of the knowledge and all the experience that I have then. I know I'm just gonna be like cackling up a storm, like hearing what I'm saying now.
Right. Yeah. Yes. You always have to be able to laugh at yourself, because you can really think one thing one moment, and then look back and be like, what was I talking about? But that's okay. Yeah.
I'm glad I've never done that, but I've heard rumors of other people. So again, thank you so much. Yes, it was wonderful meeting you. Wonderful chatting with you, and it will be wonderful to hear an update, when COVID lets you get out and see what really works for you. Because I think that's a really exciting place. It's sort of like I think back to like the cartoons, when the cartoon's like trying to run and his feet are like winding up, and you're just like stuck winding up. And as soon as COVID's over, you're going to take off. And
I feel like so many people are like that right now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I joke with people, like, I'm just excited to get out of my little hamster ball, my hamster wheel. Just like,
For sure. Yeah. Well, have a wonderful night. Thank you again. And please keep in touch.
Yes, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have a great night.
Okay. Thank you too. Take care.
And we're back. Take 4.
Oh, wow. We're going to do the whole thing in sync?
That would take
Do you
want
to finish each other's sentences?
Thank you, Nicki, for putting up with our bullshit and for reaching out and coming on the show. More importantly.
I knew that one was coming.
You're just waiting, waiting. Yeah.
No, seriously, though. Thank you, Nicki. We're excited to be able to share your story as it is today, and to hopefully be able to track it as you progress through the abyss.
Yeah.
And maybe it won't just be an abyss. Maybe it'll be a beautiful journey.
Yes. Well, let's hope so.
Well, I mean, I'm hopeful.
Well, anyway, thank you again. And
one quick reminder to go check out Alt Playground, our sponsor for the show. You can head over straight to their website, altplayground.net, or get there through our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. And it's one of the greatest places, if not the best damn place on the internet, to meet other open-minded and non-monogamous people.
If you go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, you can also find links to the show notes for every episode under the podcast tab, and also under our resources tab, all of our favorite resources. Included in these resources are links to stdcheck.com. Now, if you want to go get tested, as we all should, for STIs, we really encourage you to go use that link. You get $10 off your panel, and it does support the show.
And we're not just throwing this out there willy-nilly.
No, we actually use the service.
This is how we get tested for STIs regularly. We love it. It's super fast. It's super easy. And we can't stress enough how great of a service it is. So check that out. And again, as Emma said, it supports the show and it supports your two favorite podcasters.
Yep.
So thank you for that.
Next week.
What do we got next week? We got our first
Throuple. Woohoo!
We're totally synced today.
Yes, we have Mel, Ra, and Tom who are coming on the show. We're super pumped.
Yeah, it's a great interview. They're great people. It's super fun. We hope you come back next week and enjoy that one as much as we did. And until then, have a great week.
Yeah, we'll see you in a week. Thanks so much for listening.